do so to escape also slavery practices. Yazidi and Christian women and children and other religious minorities who refuse to convert are sold into slavery and their husbands and fathers killed or held hostage. In the world of our former colleague and presently still the UN Secretary General Special Representative on Sexual Violence and Conflict, Zainab Hawa, they have a machinery, they have a program, they have a manual on how you treat these women. They have a marriage bureau which organizes all of these marriages and the sale of women, and they have a price list. I have had the great pleasure to visit Mauritania several times during the last year, when I was Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations in Mali. It's a great, beautiful, colorful, and very proud country. And I would like to honor those who struggle against this scourge, which I unfortunately have witnessed not only in Mauritania, but also in many other parts of the world, including in West Africa. In Mauritania, the government has taken steps to improve the legal framework by making slavery a criminal offense. It's a positive step that deserves to be followed up by much more concrete action, since the new rules have not eliminated at all this practice. While estimates vary widely, it is clear that in some parts of the country, slavery is still part of local culture and everyday practice. And I saw that also in the northern part of Mali and in other parts of West Africa. In many cases, it's not even perceived as being wrong. Adults and children from traditional slave castes are forced to work without pay as cattle herders or domestic servants. This is where you come in, where IRA-Mauritania comes in. And let me share some of the advice expressed by the jury, chaired by Margaret, former United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights Defenders, and a formidable human rights defender herself. They noted that it takes courage, and it really does. We're living outside of Mauritania at the moment, to advocate for issues that the majority in the country doesn't seem to appreciate, and IRA-Mauritania is doing some amazing work on a focused issue in a very little known geographic region of the world. The jury highlighted the personal risks that the employees of IRA-Mauritania face. The leader of IRA is now in prison, and others campaigning for this cause face torture and harassment. And as I mentioned at the start, the Human Rights Tulip is intended to promote also innovation. In this regard, I'm very impressed by IRA-Mauritania's use of the Caravane de Liberté. They have turned this ancient symbol of slavery, the slave caravan, on its head by organizing long marches through the country to explain the law on slavery to the local population, to empower people, and to bring cases of slavery to justice when necessary. The caravan events have been very effective, are appreciated by victims and human rights defenders alike. And such events and many others bring the issue of slavery into the public eye and draw the attention of the national and international audiences. By awarding the Human Rights Tulip, the Netherlands celebrates you, the courage and human rights defenders worldwide. Human rights defenders defy the status quo. They stand up for human dignity. They speak out for freedom of expression, freedom to engage, for the right to think and the right to be yourself, for decent work, decent pay, and equal opportunities for all men and women. These principles and other principles of human rights form the bedrock of the safe and stable societies that we live in. Yet they are under pressure. They are under continuous attack in Europe itself and in the arc of instability surrounding Europe, in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, and in Africa. Please allow me just to expand a little bit on this topic. The relationship also between this arc of instability, of, if you wish, terrorism and human rights. And of course, many have this issue of terror on our minds. Let me say that respect for human rights is a primary objective of the policies we need, both in the Netherlands and outside. At the same time, it should be an integral element in the fight against terrorism. Terrorist attacks and even the threat of terrorist attacks are aimed at undermining principles of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. We know that many are inspired by the culture of peace, by the culture of hate, and they hate the culture of peace, rights, and justice that the international community sometimes seeks to sustain, motivating their dreadful violent acts with apocalyptic delusions. These extremist ideas do not disappear only by withdrawing passports, by placing terrorist suspects under constant surveillance. Security measures are crucial should be prioritized, but they do not suffice. Counteracting or delegitimizing extremist ideologies is also not enough to de-radicalize youngsters. In the end, our best weapon is the positive narrative of our free society if it's based on justice, tolerance and human rights. A narrative based on a vision of the future that can build on the future rather than on a past that never existed. We need to work again on the new agenda of inclusive societies in which all groups can participate. The emancipation of minorities and vulnerable groups will make us more resilient, at least, to groups promoting extremism and violence, who see apocalyptic visions, violence and rape as a modern drug to be pursued. Human rights defenders stand for ideals that some despise. And in the fight against, for instance, terrorism, human rights defenders are our allies. The awarding of this Nobel Peace Prize to the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet, in my view, amplifies this message. The people involved in the quartet played a major role in helping Tunisia establish a pluralistic democracy after the Yasmin Revolution of 2011. The quartet started meeting in the summer of 2013 as Tunisia was being rocked by political murders and civil unrest. By creating an alternative political process, at least trying it and working together on it, they helped, so far, to prevent conflict from taking root. We know Tunisia isn't out of the woods yet. Terrorist organizations still threaten peace and stability in Tunisia. There are many other challenges, but it clearly is a beacon of hope for much of the Arab world and beyond, thanks to the resilience of the national dialogue this quartet brought about. It underlines the importance of a free and robust civil society as a catalyst for a safe and secure society. It's worth mentioning with one of our jury members, and I thank the jury again for the tremendous work they have done. I haven't been able to do that. We should give them an applause. Thank you very much. And one of your colleagues is Amira Jaya of Tunisia. She couldn't be here today because I think she is in Oslo. There are always higher prices than the one I can do about that one. Because she is a member of delegation accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. And correctly, I would say, because she goes for the highest honor. Tunisia is a beautiful but also volatile example. Unfortunately, quite often things go wrong. The worst thing governments can do, if its aim is to promote security and stability, is to marginalize groups and voices in society and sideline also civil society organizations and human rights defenders. The fight against terrorism is used all too often as an argument to silence critics. Government authorities sometimes use the war on terror as cover to obstruct the work of NGOs and human rights defenders. We must not allow this to continue. Civil society and freedom must not be offered in the right struggle against terrorism. Of course, we need to stop the flow of funds to terrorist organizations. Unfortunately, civil society organizations are sometimes misused as fronts for financing terrorism. Stricter rules shouldn't have the effect of preventing civil society organizations from obtaining funds. The Netherlands advocates dialogue and international cooperation on this matter. For our part, we will continue to support human rights organizations. In addition to the war on terror, there is a broader trend towards limiting the scope of human rights defenders and civil society. Many states have enacted legislation prohibiting this exactly pointless financial support for NGOs and impeding their work by imposing advanced registration requirements or even stopping it. This is happening, we know that, in the former Soviet Union, in Asia and East Africa, sometimes also in our own continent. But the risk exists everywhere, and these rights and freedoms are under pressure. Security also comes under pressure. Freedom of assembly and association is essential in a free society. Government has a duty to make it possible for people to organize, to form organizations. And independent civil society continues to play an important role in democratic and secure societies, and it's even more important than ever. These are lessons that we try, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. Everybody makes mistakes. But we try to apply this as an active member in the coalition that we have right now in the world for peace, but also in the fight against terror. Strengthening the rule of law and improving the criminal justice system are essential in some of these fights. And we try to play a role in this respect as the co-chair of the Global Counterterrorism Forum, a platform of 15 Western and 15 non-Western countries promoting good practices in that important fight. Building on a shared conviction, we cannot do this without the principle of human rights. The GCTF helps partner countries also to assess and address human rights issues. Capacity building. The GCTF is establishment of the International Institute for Justice and the Rule of Law, for which the Netherlands is a founding member, based in Malta. It trains members of many different organizations, judges, prosecutors, the Dutch MPs who have been attending it. I'm glad there are some around here today. And I think it's important that lawmakers, police, judges, prosecutors, and other justice stakeholders in 1 year have done so many things to work with that institute. In our bilateral relations, we're also working to reinforce the link. Yes, there is a need to fight these organizations, but we have to show that we can do it in a way that balances in a much more appropriate way human rights and security. We are expanding the support that we provide, for instance, in your region, the Sahel region, for decades. Countries in the regions are joining forces to tackle these challenges together, and that deserves also our recognition. Only an integrated approach of stability and security and human rights can help improving the situation in the region. The people are demanding, and that is what you are expressing, a new social contract with their state. Public services, the rule of law, equal opportunities and equal rights for all are key, and I'm convinced that this kind of broad investment will in the end ensure also security. Our legislation obviously is not the only weapon to hinder human rights defenders in their work. Intimidation, sexual violence, detention and torture are unfortunately commonplace. It is a courageous work, as you said. It is a work with a lot of fear, and I can only speak about it with a lot of humility in a nice office here in The Hague. And that's why this international support for human rights defenders is so important. We offer that support in practical ways, of course by funding organizations that help human rights defenders, by all kinds of trainings, but the training is not the most important. People know what they stand up for. The question is, are we really going to protect and to support them also politically? I'm pleased, for instance, that in the Netherlands protecting human rights defenders is not just a matter also of national authorities. More and more cities are becoming shelter cities, offering a temporary refuge for human rights defenders. Amsterdam is the latest city to join the initiative, and we greatly value these partnerships. We also use diplomacy to help human rights defenders both behind the scenes and on center stage. We choose our tactics based on effectiveness, and a critical eye is kept on what we do. That's all to the good. The efforts we make to advance and protect human rights are very important and should be subjected to continual scrutiny. That way we can identify where improvements can be made. And we will therefore also remain in our international efforts, Madam, to support human rights defenders. United Nations support, when it becomes concrete, politically supported, is essential. The abstentions and votes against the United Nations resolution on protecting human rights defenders in the Third Committee in New York this November were to me disappointing. Unfortunately, this reflects the dire circumstances in which human rights defenders operate in many countries. Let's be open about it. In my view, the situation of human rights and protection of people has been not as bad in recent history as it's been in the last 3 to 4 years. The agenda of human rights with autocratic regimes, with civil wars going on, and the lack of effectiveness on the protection of people is something that seems to be easily an agenda to be forgotten. Summing up, I feel confident in the knowledge that we have to continue to struggle for a system to protect our citizens. Even so, not all is well. And the problems are not confined to the shady corners of our economy. Yes, in my country there are women who also are slaves, who are victims of human trafficking and are being exploited in prostitution. In my country there are also migrant laborers being exploited in the agricultural sector. And there are Dutch flag cargo ships whose Filipino crew members have not been getting a fair wage. This shows that also everybody has to remain very vigilant. If Western governments, if you wish, want to preserve the human dignity of their citizens, they also have to get this right. And everybody can be criticized, including myself, my own government. That is also why we think it's important to continue to struggle. We have decided to submit the new ILO protocol against forced labor to Parliament for approval as soon as possible. This protocol emphasizes that the government has an obligation to protect victims, provide access to compensation, and prosecute perpetrators of any form of slavery. And we have been inspired by your work to move this forward. Significantly, this protocol is also the first binding treaty that refers to the responsibility of business, and I'm glad that was brought up, to respect human rights. Protocol requires governments to help companies conduct their due diligence, that is, help them understand, monitor, mitigate negative impacts that they may have on human rights. Acknowledging both the positive and negative impacts business can have on society is in many ways the next frontier of human rights advocacy. Let me conclude by quoting the French philosopher Simone Weil. L'esclavage m'a fait perdre tout à fait le sentiment d'avoir des droits. She wrote this in 1935. It is the individual echo of the more general truths expressed by the great abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison in the 19th century. Enslave the liberty of but one human being, and the liberties of the whole world are put in peril. The situation in the Western world today may be less stark than in the days of Weil and Garrison. But there remains work to be done in making human rights enforceable everywhere in the world. The ILO protocol is testament to the fact that even today, even in our part of the world, we haven't done as well as some of us might think. And to make the Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in reality that no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Today we are honoring IRA-Mauritania for its efforts in combating slavery in Mauritania and other countries. But let's be very straight. It's not just about Mauritania. It's not just about IRA. It's about all forms of slavery all over the world. And let's not forget that according to ILO data, well over 20 million people are victims to some form of human trafficking. Many, many more are at risk. These countless people are invisible. The girls behind the closed walls of Brussels in Europe, the men who do forced labor in Asian prisons, the women in ordinary Middle Eastern households. They are concealed in the ranks of armies, like the child soldiers of Africa hidden behind the closed borders of dictatorships like North Korea, or shielded by the closed minds of bigoted cults like ISIS or Boko Haram. It's about them. This award makes these people visible, and it's about us. This award asks us a question. How can we follow the example set by IRA-Mauritania? Thank you, and again, my warmest congratulations to IRA-Mauritania. You think these Dutch people are a little crazy about tulips, that's true. They're everywhere on the tables. But the most beautiful one is honoring you, sir, for the reasons you just mentioned. I hope you will convey it to all the brave people of Mauritania who struggle against slavery in your country, in other parts of the world. And congratulations.